the game that we went to, Notre Dame beating Indiana 27-17. Notre Dame now moving on to play number 2 Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. But let's go over these PFF grades first, starting off with the Fighting Irish, and of course the highest graded player, running back Jeremiah Love, with an 80.6 grade against Indiana. Drake Bowen, 80.4 grade, the linebacker. Cornerback Leonard Moore, 76.4. Wide receiver Jordan Faison, 76.3. Offensive tackle Emil Wagner, 71.8. And quarterback Riley Leonard with a 76.2 grade. Now let's go to Indiana with their highest graded players in their 10-point loss. Defensive tackle CJ West with an 81.4 grade. Wide receiver Miles Price, 76.6. Offensive tackle Carter Smith, 70.9. Wide receiver Elijah Surratt, 69.7. Linebacker Jalen Walker, 67.6. And quarterback Curtis Rourke with a 55.1 grade. Dalton, for you, the stat that told the story in this Notre Dame victory.
I think Curt Cignetti put it best after the game in that Notre Dame was just a little bit stronger and a little bit faster than Indiana was. That makes sense. That's the biggest concern, right? They're considered to be the more talented team despite the success Indiana had this season. I think the stat for me, 22 missed tackles. Easily the worst tackling day that Indiana had all season. 179 rushing yards after contact for Notre Dame in this game. The most Indiana had allowed previously was 119 to Ohio State. It was by far their worst day tackling, their worst day giving up yards after contact. 5.6 yards after contact for Notre Dame in this game per rush. Per a reference there, okay? Ashton Jeanty for the season, who leads the nation in yards after contact per attempt,
leads all-time yards after contact.
All-time is 5.5. They basically played an entire game where they allowed yards after contact like they were playing against Ashton Jeanty, okay? And this wasn't about getting dominated in the trenches. They only gave up 0.4 yards before contact per attempt, and that's a stat that Indiana leads the nation in this year. The way that their defensive line played wasn't bad. The way that they fit the run, it's just that they just didn't tackle in the open field. Jeremiah Love's just a monster to tackle. I mean, even more so. I know everyone's going to remember the 98-yard run, but I can remember a play. I think it was 2nd and 6 where there's a run up the middle out of shotgun. The fit shut it down. He had nowhere to go. He bounces to the outside, breaks 3 tackles, and gets down the sideline for the first down anyway. That's pretty much exactly what I'm talking about here, is that Indiana, I don't think on the defensive side at least, they played a bad game in the trenches. Couldn't make tackles in open space. Jeremiah Love has proven he's one of the hardest guys to tackle in college football, whether it was him or Jadarian Price or Riley Leonard or any of the receivers. Indiana, just a level of physicality in both the Ohio State game and now especially in this game that they just couldn't quite handle. And I think Curt Cignetti was right that his defense kept fighting. Actually, there was a stretch in the second half of this game that I was really impressed with the way that they just kept holding Notre Dame to field goals or holding them out of the end zone, and they just kept battling even though their offense, as you're going to get to, really didn't give them a chance to win for the second time this year. But that's really what it was, for me, on at least that side of the ball. Notre Dame just being a little more physical, especially the ball carrier.
And I think I was really impressed by Indiana not quitting, because I think it was, 27-3 at one point in this game, and obviously it ended up being 27-17. They had a furious comeback at the end. It would have been so easy for so many teams to just roll over and die, and you just saw Indiana keep fighting until the final whistle, which I think speaks to the culture that Curt Cignetti has going there. We'll shout him out a little bit later on in the show, too. But my stat that told the story, though, Curtis Rourke against man coverage, 45.7 passing grade. Against man coverage, 13 for 23, 140 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. He had 1 big-time throw, 2 turnover-worthy plays, a 59.1% adjusted completion rate, and Notre Dame played man coverage almost the entire game. They played man coverage on 66% of his dropbacks in this game. For reference, Riley Leonard faced man coverage on 5% of his dropbacks, because Indiana, obviously a very zone-heavy team. They ran zone the entire game, and it did not work against Riley Leonard. But for Curtis Rourke, though, he just was not good enough against man coverage. And also, Dalton, usually man coverage is paired with a blitz. And when it was paired with a blitz in this game, we had man coverage and Notre Dame blitzed Curtis Rourke. He had a 37.2 passing grade, and he went 3 for 9 for 34 yards. We know this Notre Dame secondary is elite. And now they know that too, and I think a lot of other teams are noticing it too. They can just play one-on-one, single coverage. They don't need to worry about playing zone coverage. They can just it looked like they were running the routes better than Indiana's receivers were at times, honestly, in that game. And I think they just dared Curtis Rourke to make tight throws into tight coverage. And with that, blitz is getting home as well. I just really think Curtis Rourke just was not good enough against man coverage. I don't think the receivers were good enough against man coverage. And the offensive line couldn't hold up against the blitzes. Once again, it just was a perfect game plan, I think, for Marcus Freeman on defense.
It was. It's all the things you're concerned about with Indiana as an offense is that they have a good receiving core, but it's not exactly loaded with speed. And you mentioned the blitz pickups. That's something we talked about all week is, okay, well, if you heavily blitz Indiana, that's when they struggle. They can pass protect against a four-man rush, and I think there were times they did that in this game. But when they got blitzed, whether it be against Michigan or Ohio State or Notre Dame, that was the biggest problem in pass protection. I think, look, there were times early in this game where they were chucking up go balls and back shoulders to the outside, and that's generally not where Indiana lives as an offense. And I think the defensive look, all the cover one you're seeing, generally tells you, yeah, that's the way to go. But when you have a team as good in man coverage as Notre Dame is, that's just not going to work, right? And we see Leonard Moore and Christian Gray on the outside, and you have Xavier Watts flying around at safety, picking balls off and getting to the football. And I mean, I'll tell you what, I thought Xavier Watts played a great game too, at free safety. And I think it helps when you're playing all that cover one to have a safety with that much range and that good at ball skills. It's the perfect storm of we are one of the few teams in the country with the ability to play man coverage half the time, right? Cover one, I think it's half the time on the season. I believe it might be, if it's not the highest rate in the country, it's in the top 3. Just you mentioned it, a really good game plan by Marcus Freeman. They stopped the run up front as well. They did a really good job with that, especially early in the game. And I think the part of this for Indiana, and I don't think they should feel bad about it, we just got 2 games where they maxed out on offense. It's a level that they couldn't hit just because they didn't have enough talent. And I think if you're Curt Cignetti, there's nothing not to be proud of here.
No.
I think, look, everybody and their mother knew going into the season, during the season, even at this point, Indiana wasn't winning a national title. We know this. Yeah, I even picked him to win this game, and I probably wouldn't have picked him to beat Georgia, honestly. Yeah. He squeezed every last bit of juice he could out of this team. And I don't think there's any issue with that. The fact that he could do that at a school like Indiana and get to the top 12 and get to this spot and have his defense play the way they did for a while in this game and just offensively, once you hit that level and your team hits the limit on its level of talent, it is what it is. I don't think anybody needs to be sitting here calling Indiana frauds. I think Curt Cignetti darn well deserved to win Coach of the Year for getting a bunch of James Madison guys and a quarterback from Ohio to the college football playoff. It's an incredible job, and I think just in these 2 games that they lost, they hit their limit, and that's okay. I think that's all you can ask for. Now they know the standard. Now they know where they need to get to, and if they want to prove to all the people that they're not frauds and whatever stupid things they're calling them on the internet, come back and have another great season next year, and I don't have any issue with that.
Yeah, okay. I want to shout out Curt Cignetti as well. I think there's a lot of revisionist history going on Twitter during that game, just saying, oh, this is your Coach of the Year, all that. Yeah, he's your Coach of the Year. Yeah, I have absolutely no problem with
this. This is the Indiana Hoosiers.
I literally tweeted, Dalton. I said, we are clowning. Just to remind people, we are clowning Indiana for losing to Notre Dame in the college football playoff. Say that out loud and then think about whether or not you want to tweet about Indiana and how embarrassing it was for them. The fact that they're even here is ridiculous. They won 3-9 last year. It's the most wins they've ever had in a single season. I don't believe they've ever had 10 wins in a season, right? I don't think so either. So
no.
It's insane what he did in 1 year at Indiana. And yeah, listen, there are some 4th down calls I didn't agree with, right? He did not coach a perfect game at all. But at the same time, it's Indiana going against Notre Dame in the college football playoff in South Bend as well. And they lost by 10 points. This is the closest game I think we had of any of these games. I don't know what we're trying to clown Curt Cignetti for. I think so many people on Twitter treat college football like the NFL, where they think, oh, everyone's created equal, everyone has the same salary cap, everyone has the same draft picks, everything. It's not that, guys. It's not that at all. Those 2 programs, the gap in resources of those 2 programs is massive. It really is. So I know Indiana, they have a lot of money in their athletic department, but not a lot of it goes to football a lot of times. So just the fact that we're clowning a program that has historically been one of the worst in the Power 4 all time against historically maybe the greatest program in college football history, what are we talking about right now? So I thought there was a lot of revisionist history going on, clowning Curt Cignetti in that game. Because I thought
2 goals for every first-year coach. Establish a culture, bring in talent.
Yep.
He did both of those things and a whole lot more.
Yeah.
The fact that if they went 8-4 this year, and made a bowl game, we would have sat here and said, what a wildly successful year for Indiana. The fact that they got to this point,
11-2,
yeah, there is absolutely no reason. There's no reason to shame them for that. They had the greatest season in school history, and they absolutely deserve to be where they are. And how many teams do we see in every sport every year get into the first round, face a team better than them, get beat, move on? It's part of the process. Championships are not won. They are, I should say, championships are won. When they're won, it's a multi-year process. It's not. You know how few teams in the history of not just football but any sport go and win the whole thing on their first run? Almost none of them. Mahomes didn't even do it.
Yeah.
I mean, the only guy that really did it was Tom Brady, and even for that Patriots team, they had lost the Super Bowl to the Packers with Drew Bledsoe, and it was the core of that team and all that, and Brady just kind of put them over the top and had the game winning. Like, it's not a thing where on your first time there you're going to win the whole thing. That's not how it works. Hell, ask Georgia. How many years of pain did Georgia have before they started winning them now? It's Clemson forever. I mean, even Saban had to get that thing off the ground at Alabama. I mean, there's no shame in any. Look, did they lose? They lost. Yeah, Notre Dame proved they were the better team. They're one of the 8 best teams in the country. Doesn't mean the committee got it wrong. The process was correct. I don't care that you weren't that entertained by it. The process was correct.
So they're right now number 8. We think they'll stay at least above, say, 11th or better, right, in the final ranking, AP ranking probably. So if that happens, I just want to say that.
Yes, I don't much care what the AP
No,
thinks after this point. That's why we play them on the field.
Listen, I'm just saying because in 2020 they finished number 12. Since then, they've had 3 times they finished in the top 25 since 1967. They were going to have their highest ranking in a postseason poll since 1967 when they finished 4th in the country.
There we go.
So only 3 times since 1967 have they finished the year ranked. And we're clowning this program for losing in the college football playoff. I don't. Okay. Let's get back to Notre Dame, though. Most impressive part of the victory, because obviously it was a very impressive performance by the Fighting Irish, Dalton. Most impressive part for Notre Dame in this win.
That man coverage you pointed out. Look, you gotta have really legitimate players to run as much man coverage as and they do. And going back and watching it again, true freshman corner Leonard Moore on the outside. Yeah, this kid is unreal. I mean, and I know there's other guys that played well. Christian Gray's been good lately. Xavier Watts is always good, and then run defense. But they got to look, when they lost Ben Morrison for the season, we got concerned. Ben Morrison might be a top 20 pick in the NFL draft, and they stick a true freshman in here in Leonard Moore, and you don't miss a beat. 76.2 coverage grade, 6 targets, 1 catch allowed for 17 yards, and that catch was in the final 2 minutes when the game was already well out of hand. 34 of his 42 coverage snaps in press coverage. True freshman we're talking about against what had been an elite offense for most of the year, right? 84.7 overall grade this season. Right now 13th among all corners. Leonard Moore is an immediate, just another true freshman superstar in a year full of them outside at corner. This guy we're going to be talking about for the next 2 years and probably in the same light as we've been talking about Ben Morrison, because his career is getting off to just as good a start. And the fact that you could send a true freshman out there to play this much man in a spot like this, it's incredible. And the fact that he thrived is just amazing. Leonard Moore has been such a spark plug for them in their secondary, playing the boundary, playing press man. I mean, it's just incredible, and he had another terrific game.
The fact that you can lose a projected top 20 pick in Ben Morrison for the season and still run the same defense with a true freshman is just a testament to how good that secondary is. I mean, Leonard Moore, you're right. He is a star, and a star that we'll be talking about for at least the next couple seasons of college football. Dawn, a star that we'll be talking about next year, at least probably only next year, because he's going to the NFL, I'd imagine, right after that, is Jeremiah Love, my most impressive part in this game. So he was obviously the highest grade player on 22 snaps. He only played 22 snaps in this game, so an 80.6 grade, but he made his mark on those 22 snaps. 8 carries for 108 yards and a touchdown. He had 114 yards after contact. He had more yards after contact than he had rushing yards in this game. 98-yard touchdown, by far the biggest play of the game, and probably one of the biggest plays that we'll see all season, honestly. He broke a tackle on 63% of his carries as well. He caught 2 passes for 18 yards. This season, he has a 92.2 PFF grade. That is 3rd among all running backs in college football. The only ones who had a better grade than him, Ashton Ginty, Cam Scatterbo. Both those guys were in the top 5 of Heisman voting this year. Jeremiah Love is a bona fide superstar. He is, I think without a doubt, the best running back in college football going into next year, and a legitimate Heisman candidate. I put out my way too early Heisman finalist predictions during the Heisman ceremony this year. I had Jeremiah Love in the top 4. I really think this guy is that freaking good that Notre Dame could just ride him next year to, again, another great season. He is special, man. He really is. He seemed like he was playing with Indiana at times out there. I remember I turned to you while we were up there in the press box. I was like, dude, a lot of heat check runs right now. He's trying to hurdle guys out there. He's stiff arming guys out there. Some of the greatest 2-yard gains you'll ever see, honestly. Jeremiah Love, dude, he is so hard to tackle. He's so fast. He's so athletic. He is pretty easily, in my opinion, the best running back in the country going into next year.
He's got a bit of everything, doesn't he? The combination of speed and physicality, I think, absolutely makes that justified going into next year. It's just it's crazy. Look, they're gonna, with Riley Leonard gone, they're gonna need to figure out the passing game next year. We'll figure out next year, but tell you what, Jeremiah Love, he looks like he won't have any issues running on Georgia, right? I mean, and Georgia's got maybe an even better run defense than Indiana. And Indiana, don't get me wrong, they have a fantastic run defense, and he just kept making it happen after contact, breaking tackles, and they're going to need, I wonder if, you mentioned he only had 8 carries and a handful of catches?
Yeah.
You got to wonder if it was, okay, we got the score where we want it. Next week, dude. Maybe next week we're talking 25, 30 carries for them because they might need it against Georgia, and who knows how low scoring that game is. But we know running the ball is going to be at a premium in that game.
Absolutely. So Notre Dame beating Indiana 27-17 in the battle for the state of Indiana, and Notre Dame now moving on to play number 2 Georgia in the Sugar Bowl at Carson Beckless, Georgia, as well, Dalton. That's going to be a whale of a game that we're going to get in the Sugar Bowl on New Year's Day in a couple weeks. Hey, thanks for watching another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Please make sure you guys subscribe to the channel.
Also, subscribe to PFF Plus at subscribe.pff.com for all of the same data and grades that we use in our show, plus fantasy tools, betting tools, and our mock draft simulator.